The Online Writing Center space. As we've come to know it through synchronous meetings on WC Online in our own Writing Center, it is a space that provides increased accessibility and extended outreach for the Writing Center as a whole. While it can be fun to point out the new types of mishaps that may not be seen in in-person sessions, like writers trying to join online sessions while driving, troubleshooting and potential redirection is normal for any mode of tutoring and doesn't trump all the successfully provided writing help these services have brought about thus far. However, the Online Writing Center space was not always this way. As we look further back in time, we see how much our Online Writing Center spaces have evolved or came about through the 2020 pandemic, meaning there was a time where for many, these online options were not as accessible or even as effective as they are now. For our purposes, we can just start by calling this the pre-pandemic era. If we look as far as 2006, I'm still crawling on all fours, but others are having to consider how emerging technology can be implemented into the Writing Center space. For the majority of writing centers at the time, the online space was exclusively asynchronous and chat-based. The most online interaction was done through email, chat boards, and information pages like resources on Purdue OWL. While platforms for video and audio were rising in advancement, they often costed extra money or required equipment writers may not have on hand. Overall, they were deemed less efficient, not being able to match up to in-person sessions and leading many writing centers and student writers to have little to no interest in exploring the online possibilities beyond what they already had. In looking to the early 2010s, maybe around 2012 to 2015, we see that the thoughts about online services still remain quite the same at large. Despite the growing technology and video quality of the time, online sessions are still seen as less than in-person sessions, not being able to match the levels of collaboration and connection and being emotionless. They were often seen as daunting endeavors in their experience, and in the budget writing centers were often having to find to put together these services. As we move about further in time, it's 2020, I'm in 9th grade, and everything begins to shut down. This is around the time that we hit the height of the pandemic. People are coughing, everyone is starting to lose their sense of taste, and many writing centers are having to redefine themselves as they lose the physical space they have come to rely on. For some centers at the time, they found that they were having to set up entirely new services and troubleshoot, as they had never offered online services before. For others, they found they needed to expand their already online presence, adding asynchronous services to their network. Overall, many writing centers found themselves relying on an array of platforms like WC Online, Zoom, Skype, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and more. In looking at tutor and writer accounts of their experience, we see many different things that contributed to making up the online space. One of these things was the sheer amount of platforms available for tutors to use. Many found the access to many tools to be helpful and engaging for these types of sessions. Another was personal space. In picture feedback provided from writers in a survey, one writing center found how students envisioned their at-home writing space, which contributed to how the online space was seen as well. Trends were lots of artwork, quotes, family photos on walls, and snacks. All things that directly represented the writer's personality and provided comfort. Even taking this out of the context of the pandemic, this seemed to be a main highlight of these types of sessions, increased comfortability. However, another aspect of this personal space was noise. In synchronous video sessions, both writers and tutors thought it difficult to find a quiet space to work, having to work around other schedules and personal endeavors, with one tutor even having a frog business on the side, so in his sessions you could hear the frogs croaking. Overall, it just made it difficult to have a steady workflow at times with all the extra noise. In addition to this, many tutors and writers found a large issue of these online sessions to be, of course, internet connection. Being that people were having to rely on their own homes for the internet, its accessibility varied across homes based on people's backgrounds and lifestyles overall. In order to work with this issue, one university utilized asynchronous feedback. With the knowledge of their university population being mainly minorities that lived in rural areas and worked along with going to school full-time, they saw value in asynchronous sessions. The services were utilized well, with about 50% of visits being asynchronous and tutors of the Writing Center reporting knowing students that had never been able to go to the Writing Center before, now finally having access to the services and having less anxiety about sessions. The same idea seemed to be shared by other studies that explore asynchronous methods as well. However, tutors also noted feeling a lack of connection and less communication for writer needs, leading them to also comment how they preferred in-person or synchronous sessions. Once again, these same comments were also brought up in many of the other articles I read, in which synchronous forms of online sessions were preferred. For many writing centers, asynchronous meetings were still being done mainly by email and lacked the collaboration and we factor that is so valued in writing center practices. Finally, going into the post-pandemic era, many writing centers found themselves wanting to keep their online spaces. During the pandemic, they had seen how it allowed them to connect to student writers and those in the surrounding community in ways they had not seen before. As they continued to use the spaces they built, they learned more and more about ways to integrate the online space into the physical space, having online and in-person sessions go hand in hand. In this, many tutors found themselves having to adjust to tailoring their tutoring styles to in-person and online resources. For example, some tutors found themselves having to adjust to not always being able to directly share screen with writers anymore, being in an open communal writing center space again, or using more physical note-taking strategies over their learned online ones. Small changes in practice that required adjustment. As some writing centers ventured to keep their online spaces, some also took a deeper dive into the asynchronous space. While known for its weakness in portraying a collaborative tutoring style, one university looked into making it more multimodal by adding video and audio notes that writers can interact with. In this, they found success and opened new ways to think about asynchronous online methods outside of just text. Overall, the online writing center space has come a long way since its early stages of simply being chat-based and continues to only grow as time goes on. As we look toward the future, we see how the online space is not just defined by one space or platform, but many. It is not simply just an extension of the space that makes up the writing center, but the very practices and feelings it invokes and its mission overall, to be a place accessed and used by all writers to make progress and feel more confident in their process.